Oh yeah, thanks for the great introduction. I'm surprised that you actually remembered all that title and degrees and whatever. Yeah. So, well, thank you all for coming. I guess I'm aware that the attendance for the seminar sometime it could be a lot of people, sometimes it could be less people, and of course this is the last session between you and the end of the semester or the end of or the summer, right? So and also know that Bernie Sanders in town. So I was like, oh, nobody's going to show up because I'm competing with this because I think a line is supposed to be forming like right now. So if you go outside the traffic, it's crazy. So I didn't actually expect any of you to come, but thanks for setting aside the time to actually show up. I appreciate this. So obviously, as you know, the talk is about Instagram, and there's the temporal aspect, which we did a sort of time series analysis of the Instagram behavior between teens and adults. And of course, the comparative aspect is really about, I'll talk about also why teens and adults are like this really interesting population that we're looking at, instead of other kind of different ways of grouping these different population using social media. So to start, of course, this is like a typical intro about there's really high penetration of internet users. Pretty much, I think, across the board. This is pretty recent. I think published by Pew in 2015. I think roughly 71% of the adults are on the internet. And then, however, so when you get into the deeper analysis about sort of by age and also by gender, by educational level, by income level, and there shows a sort of somewhat of a pretty big disparity, right? And then I think that at the bottom here, you can see this is what we typically call the digital divide in terms of the socioeconomical status dictating people's access to resources such as the internet or technology or social media. Imagine if you're in the poorer community, maybe you don't have the smartphones, so then so you're not always connected, or you don't have like internet, or you're not in the group of community where imagine like your typical social circle doesn't involve other tech-savvy users, so that's why you will use the internet or use social media platforms generally less. So, but then you can also see that in general, though, across all these different background and demographics categories, the age, in fact, is the biggest differentiator across the access and use of social media platforms. And this is huge, right? So even for gender, for example, I think roughly there's about I think a little bit less than 10% difference. And then, but it's been known that I think initially, I think here it's indicating that females are, of course, use social media more. And, of course, like you understand that the higher income level have more access to internet and social media. More educated people access internet and social media more, right? So, but in this talk, of course, I focus on the difference between teens and adults, partially because of the, as you see, the huge disparity in terms of access and also use of social media. So here's the Instagram demographics. I don't know, it's kind of small, right? I mean, maybe it's hard for you to see. I took this directly out of the Pew website. So in fact, it's got pretty high penetration, right? Like 28% of the internet users. And in fact, it's roughly equal split across pretty much all demographics. Because like, if you think about it, if you look at the education level, roughly like 1/3 of the population across all these different educational level, also even in terms of income category. So it seems like this disparity that we saw earlier across all social networking platforms is a little bit less, I guess it's more equalized on Instagram, because that means that Instagram has like a wider set of wider set of usage by the general population. And then so talk about, generally when we come to talk about social media, if you think about what people use social media for, there's been obviously a lot of social scientists and a lot of ethnographers and a lot of researchers, information scientists, studying what people use social media for. And I think that we are all, of course, like we are all social media users. I mean, who here doesn't use social media? So like, did you use like any kind of LinkedIn or like? So what I mean is that like even including any kind of social networking site, like is quite pervasive these days. That technically social networking sites include also those sites that include social networking features these days. So as in, if you think about it, there's really not, I guess in the past like kind of 5-7 years, You know, it doesn't matter what you, even if you use like go on to CNN and then there's these like comments at the bottom, and you can like kind of, a lot of them initially started by using Facebook API. So like people can just post using their Facebook account, and then you can connect to other people. So generally, like when you can like, when you can share, retweet, not just retweet, but just sharing, liking, or commenting, these are considered to be very salient features of the social networking sites. So meaning that it's really hard to escape either being exposed to, or if you actually do anything online these days, it all kind of falls into this kind of social networking phenomena, right? I mean, essentially you're connecting with other people, you're sharing, you're connecting, you're discussing. What's that? Reddit does count as well. In fact, Reddit by definition, if you go into Reddit, if you go into Wikipedia these days, like you go to, in fact, it says Reddit is a social networking site. Like that's kind of like the first line on any of these. So, yeah, in fact, I'm actually writing a paper on Reddit as of this moment. In fact, actually these kind of comparative, like large scale and data analysis on these open social media platforms, they're actually pretty hard to do. I mean, it's just like, actually, in fact, if you search by like literature review, like there's not a whole lot of paper on actually specifically analyzing people's behavioral patterns on Reddit. So I'm actually doing that. That's my next paper that I'm writing. So anyway, but in general, though, social media, people use it for relationship maintenance, of course, like, you know, connecting with friends, families. Social surveillance, like, you know, eavesdropping or like stalking kind of behavior, just kind of also like social interaction about like sort of, like we already talked about the social interaction part. Entertainment, right? You look for entertainment, you do self-promotion, identity management, and also you do like information seeking. Like a lot of people now these days, in fact, I think there was a statistic that was just published about Reddit that most Reddit users, I think 85% of them predominantly get news from Reddit. So meaning that Reddit becomes this central platform for them to access information, right? But if you think about that, I mean, does that mean that Reddit is really diversified, or does Reddit create a social bubble, you know? It's like what does that mean? Like, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing, right? So maybe Reddit is really diverse. So we will see. I mean, of course, my paper would, by the time I finish writing that paper at the end of next month, and then we would know, so.
I think Pew has another statistic about social media users in general, and 65% of adults get their news from social media as of 2013.
Yeah, in fact, the traditional print, there's all these statistics tracking about, for example, between traditional print, digital print, social media. And then you can see, typically in these reports, you see the obvious trend of like declining of print media. Like I think today, as of maybe 2016, I think like 6% of people get their information from print media. So everything is digital now. It's really, really, so meaning that this is why like advertising revenue is so important for these online media companies, right? So, you know, it became like a place for public, you know, publishing, you know, disseminating information, promotion, you know, propaganda, whatever. So yeah, so then the difference between the way that people in research traditionally formulated the difference between the two populations of teens and adults are, they usually frame them as the digital natives. I guess there should be a plural in the end. And then there should be, and also digital immigrants, right? So digital natives are this concept where today, I guess the teens today, I mean, also the kids that are being born today, they're raised in this environment where like technology is everywhere, you know, with iPads and iPhones, and then like, you know, they probably already had a Facebook account before they were born. So like their parents created that, you know, or they post all their baby pictures and they have no control for it. So then these people are very used to socializing on Facebook, right? I mean, they're used to it. The model of interaction is sort of ingrained because they grew up with that. You know, just like how the swiping of the thumb or the finger touch, the touch screen. So whereas these digital immigrants are the sort of the adults that did not grow up with this type of technology. So then perhaps then there was sort of a learning curve that had to overcome. But then it's kind of like learning like a first language. Like people argue that, you know, if you don't learn a language until like you're like after 3, then it becomes like really kind of foreign. And then it's like it's never going to become your native tongue because native tongue sticks with you forever, right? So this is why like people were having these sort of theoretical framing between the digital native versus digital immigrants. And then for teens, at least for this particular study, we focus on teens between 13 to 19 years old. And most likely, but most of it is also this is, I mean, partially because obviously teenagers are like in their, teenage years, but also because the way that we determine age information, we use facial recognition. But when you're younger, like it's really hard to tell the age of kids. So, but like, so basically when you're above like 13, then you start to actually have these features that are easily recognized by computer algorithms. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And adults are, we formulate them as 25 to 39, because I guess anybody younger than, I guess 25 will be considered to be young adults, right? They're just like fresh college graduates, maybe getting their first job, or maybe they've gone to grad school, that type of stuff. But also this is I guess the 5-year or 6-year difference is also in a way artificially selected by me and by my group of researchers, because then this way, because there are some errors in the facial recognition algorithm. So if you set this range of 6 years apart, then you get like no overlap. But if you set it within maybe a couple of years, then you get some kind of, the algorithm is not as accurate at that level. So this is why we sort of divided into teens and adults 13 to 19 years old and 25 to 39 years old. Is that clear? Yes, I will talk a lot more about that later. So of course, as you know, the teens are traditionally known for all these reports about they're digital natives. They're early adopters of online social space, like for example, these Kik or Snapchat or Vine or Vid and all these other platforms are Yik Yak stuff. And teens are always on these platforms, but adults have much more slower. It takes much longer for them to migrate to these platforms, if ever. So they also use multiple social media sites to maintain different forms of communication. This is also interesting because adults tend to stick to a few, for depending on whatever the purpose that they use for. But teens use a lot more. They use like kind of one social media site for this purpose, another social media for a different purpose, and they use like maybe you can manage easily over a dozen different social media site platforms. So, which is really different. And also in terms of, they also maintain a larger social network. That means that they have more larger friendship base, more fellowship, more people who follow them, more people who befriend them on their social media profiles, right? So whether this becomes like meaningful relationship or not, and then we can look at it a little bit more. And also, they use social media for self-representation, whereas adults tend to be less. For example, some adults can say, oh, my digital space is a digital space, my personal offline space is offline space. But for the teenagers, that boundary is a little bit more gray. It's a little bit less defined. It's a little bit ambiguous. And also, they're prone to social influence because they care a lot about their online image that they present in the social media space, which I'll talk a lot more. So here are some the research questions when I started to look at, based on the literature, based on these different, what we know about the teens. And then traditionally also, like I mentioned before this study, most of the reports about intergenerational differences were done by interviews or surveys or observations. I think that at least computationally, I think this is one of the first comprehensive studies of using kind of analytical tools to look at differences between teens and adults at a large scale level. So then do teens behave differently from adults on Instagram? Of course they do, and then we offer some kind of explanation. And also if behavioral differences exist, what social, psychological, and technological factors might explain such behavioral difference, right? So this is what I aim to explore in this study, and then we can have, active discussion throughout this study. So, and also especially for teens, as of end of 2014, this could be outdated. This could be outdated by now, right? Because the shift in the technological landscape is so fast. But at least at the end of 2014, Instagram is the second most popular platform adopted by the teens, with 52%. And you see how like Snapchat is here. I'm assuming this is a lot higher now. And then Twitter probably less. I think Twitter is like losing popularity these days. And then of course Google Plus and these other ones. Vine probably increased a little bit, and Tumblr I think also increased as well. But again, this is like a snapshot, and you can think about plus minus like 10-15% or something like that, from end of 2014 to today. And then the data collection, here's what I'm telling you about. We used a two-step random seed calling method So meaning that how do we randomly collect the data on Instagram? So we basically pick, just kind of random, using the Explore button on Instagram, and you pick a random user. So just randomly pick the person. So you get the, you start to collect the information about basically if the person has more than 150 followers, then you take the 150 follower. If the person does not have 150 followers, you take another random user until you get to 150 followers. And then from that, 150,000, 150,000, not 150. Just like basically, essentially, you randomly select the seed users, and then you eventually check their followers. You keep on collecting the number of followers until you get to we get to a set of 150,000 users. And from that group of users, we randomly select 1,000 from that 150,000 users, and then we continue to crawl those 1,000 users' followers until we get 2 million unique users. Right? So basically, this random seeding process is to make sure that, because you know how in social science research, this thing called the snowballing. So essentially, if you restrict yourself to keep on collecting from the same pool of users, then you essentially run into biases because people tend to have homophily. So they ended up connecting with the people that are more similar to them. So this sort of a random seed crawling, which I know there's an expert on random walk algorithms here in the audience. So this is a way to kind of randomize our sampling bias, right? And then the behavioral data that we collect from the Instagram API, which is really straightforward, right? It has a typical username, file description, number of followers, number of followings, number of photos posted, number of likes, and also the text and comments in all the photos. So, and then here's the sample profile, which I'm sure that y'all have seen this. I mean, this is not surprising. I mean, it's just like a typical, it looks like any other photo website. But essentially, so we used a sort of a mixed methods approach to detect age information from Instagram, right? So first we look at the team's profile, the ones that actually have a description, right? Because a lot of them actually do, right? They say, well, I'm 23 years old, or I'm blah, 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 right? So essentially we do a sort of a textual pattern recognition using NLP to detect if they say I'm this age, we trust that they are this age, right? Or depending on when of course, there might be some bias. Depending on when the profiles are created, we adjust for the differences. Imagine we checked the last modified data of the profile apparently was a year ago, then we subtract it or something like that, or we increase it by a year. So of course, and also we only look at the ones that we complement that with facial recognition using Face++. And then after that, we use also crowdsourcing, Amazon Mechanical Turk. Essentially 2 authors, including myself and one of my students that I was working with. And then we use also Amazon Mechanical Turk that we went through not all 2 million, right? Not all 2 million, because a lot of them didn't, first of all, a lot of them didn't have a profile description. A lot of them didn't have a profile photo, like this one, for example, right? It was like this balloon house and from up, right? So we exclude photos without, and then also we look at several different iterations of profile photos. For example, because teens change their profile photos and then they take their selfies, and so we look at the different versions, and then we try to get some kind of boost the accuracy of the detection mechanism. So essentially, after we removed the ones that did not qualify and randomly sampled, we got 26, or roughly 27,000 users. Half of them were teens, half of them were adults, right? And these were all manually verified by myself and the students I'm working with, and also the Amazon Mechanical Turk workers.
When you let's say analyze different photos and the outcome with ages with the distribution, like 13 years versus 18 years, then what do you do?
Well, when we were looking at, well, first of all, we validate the description. We look at their friends. We look at basically they don't just have 2; we have multiple. So we keep on kind of going through all the photos. Right? And then we kind of try to analyze using the algorithm, say maybe on average this could be 25, for example. But of course the ones that, especially the ones that I think it throws out the algorithms are the ones that with bad lighting and also with the facial angle. So then we have to look at the ones, obviously, we have to manually pick out the ones that are kind of facing the camera or something like that. That one usually is more accurate. So we filter out the bad ones too. When we were doing the kind of the manual process, which is 27,000 people, it took a while, So, but of course, if algorithms were more sophisticated, then we can analyze all 2 million, right? But of course, a lot of them, like I mentioned, did not always have like an actual profile photos, and a lot of them didn't actually have the description, so we left those out, right? So
do you think that this could introduce some biases in your questions?
potentially, for example, then imagine like people who might be more private, they prefer not to disclose, and also like people who might be less confident or something, they didn't want to put their face online. So this could potentially, but then who are these people then, right? So for example, are these? I'm trying to imagine like, are there any kind of theories or reports about, say, people who are more private? Do they tend to be younger, or do they tend to be older? You know, I mean, what do you guys think? Like, do you think like older people will be more private or younger people will be more private? Any hypothesis?
There's actually a recent paper that talked about different types of people, like people with different types of personalities using different types of photos and so on, when they do use these. So even these differences could be reflected in, not only not using a photo, but using a specific style of photo.
So potentially the people who have, you say, Instagram profile could be extroverts. Do you think that's like, would they be introverts? Or imagine if they maintain all their social interaction online, right? As in they have all these online friends, and they go outside, they just look down and they don't talk to people. As in, you know what I mean? Like, as in, is there any? What I mean is, are we able to say that, say, on Instagram, all the ones that have profile pictures are either this personality or that personality? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, as in, it's kind of hard to. I would assume that, yeah.
To say that even if there is someone who's introvert, for example,
Yeah.
they could end up still using their photo, but the way they pose in the photo would be different from someone who's extrovert, for example.
Potentially, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but yeah. So this is how we determine the age information from Instagram profiles, and then overall, like I mentioned, text matching, face detection, and then also like we collected data over 2 different periods, so we can have comparison. Or in the middle of 2014, at the end of 2014, early 2015, and then we calculated like all these different. I guess the difference in terms of the change in terms of the number of photos posted, number of photos added, and all the kind of commenting, liking behaviors throughout this entire period in these different 2 periods. So we can compare the temporal. This is the temporal aspect. So like here I want to point out the interesting thing about immediately when we look at the just general. This is very high level. The first set of findings, because you will assume, because remember how like before when social sciences, when we talk about teens and adults, they're savvy users, they're active users, they're early adopters, they live in social media, and so pretty much they are supposed to use social media more, right, in all aspects. But it turns out that if you look at this photo, of course, yes, teens do post more likes, and then they get more likes, and then they use more tag features, they comment more, they have more followers and more people following them. But this is the interesting finding in terms of they generally post less photos than adults.
This is over the same time period?
Yeah.
Or is this like full history of the accounts?
The same time periods. The periods that I was telling about, mid-2014 and end of 2014. Yeah, during that period they posted on average, I think this is the account, the total, so there's on average they have posted 110 photos on their account. So then this is a little bit puzzling, right? So this is what I'm saying.
But the standard deviations are quite high, so the difference is still.
Absolutely. Yep. Some teams might not post a lot. Some teams, maybe there are these, you know how of course like in any social media platform, there are these kind of like celebrity users, like a lot of followers. These team, I don't know, man, the guys like.
Might trigger one of the founders on Instagram was giving the keynote at SCW and was mentioning that it's kind of like bad etiquette to post too many photos because then you're kind of like always wanting the attention.
Oh yeah. So this is actually.
Because like teens will be more prone to follow this kind of social norms.
Yeah, so then actually posting a lot of pictures about themselves is kind of a narcissistic behavior kind of thing, right? So it's almost like, but a lot of teens do that. That's what I mean. Like it's not just about introvert and extrovert. In fact, a lot of teens do that just across the board. And I'll actually get into this a little bit more. so basically in terms of the content about their photos, so we actually use, because then you know how when teens post these tags, and then essentially they add the description, you know, using comments or tags. So we did a kind of a analysis on the categories of the different tags, and then we use like sort of we get the ground truth tag topics from tagsforlikes.com and then also textgram.com, and these are sites that actually kind of have descriptions about what kind of tag names will map to the different categories. So then we use Leighton, is it Dirichlet? Is that how you pronounce it, Dirichlet? Or it's like, yeah, but it's a difficult word. I think in French they pronounce it differently, and then in German they probably pronounce it differently, and in English they pronounce it all differently. So like, there are actually 3 different ways of pronouncing this word depending on where you're from. And I think I've heard all 3 different versions, so I'm just going to call it LDA. So the MALA is like this a program developed by a group of researchers at UMass Amherst. It does the sort of, what LDA does is it's cover terms that frequently appear together. They're of similar topics, right? So essentially then we look at the different topics, and then across the board, all these different photos, out of the 27,000 users. We found these different distinct categories, for example, arts, design, entertainment, fashion, and then the ones that they're asking for people to actually follow them, and also food, location, and then moods, emotion, nature, sports, wellness, that type of stuff. So basically, across the board, these are the topics that was discovered through using the LDA algorithm. And this is like the sort of the different types of tags that teens and adults use differently. The one salient thing that you can see is that here, about roughly 40% of their photos were concentrating on this mood and emotion categories. Okay, so about like whether they feel sad, or, and then also like you know, whether it's like they're probably a lot of time when they feel sad they just post a selfie, and then like in a dark room or something like that, you know. And then, so then also like, whereas adults, like they post a lot more about locations. So you think about like in terms of, there's also these we're trying to think about explanations. For, of course, adults, you know, they make their money, right? So they travel, and then they have like kind of opportunity to go on the trips. And then like, for example, imagine you grow up in a neighborhood. You don't really imagine before you had your car, you had money, like you really kind of just like stuck around your neighborhood and hang out with your friends, but biking everywhere, maybe, I don't know, but like it's like, what I mean is that adults actually, when you know, they have the money, they have the leisure, and they are able to travel more. So they post, they're capable of posting. So basically, one of our, at least when we look at the photos, we think is because sort of just a general lifestyle difference between adults and the teens. It's generally the teens are going to school, they're there, they know their general physical social surroundings are focusing on their group of school friends, versus like adults that, you know, they do all kinds of stuff, they have hobbies and stuff like that. So this is why we think that this type of differences exist, because of this sort of salient different kind of grouping of the categories. And then, so then you can obviously say, and then we're like, okay, so here's the ratio. So obviously teens added a lot more. In fact, almost like twice, actually more than twice, the total amount of selfies for all tag photos. Like 13% of the teens' photos are some kind of selfie, right? And then also like, and then we actually, this is detected by algorithm. We also manually, again, like we manually verified, you know, like I said, there's a lot of photos. We manually verified photos, randomly picked 1,000 users, and we went through all the photos. We were like, okay, this is a selfie, this is a selfie, this is a selfie. So still, it's actually quite actually 26% of the teens, those randomly selected teens, 26% of their photos are selfies, right? So basically, you say teens post a lot of selfies, right? So now we also see that but that's like a well-known effect. But now we're looking at the ways that they posted, and can you remember how we had the data for posting and also removing photos? And then we're looking at the way that teens post and remove photos, so that when you can see over because we had the sort of the temporal data set, you know, from like sort of the in each of the 2 periods, we divided the periods into 12-hour intervals, right? So first 12 hours a day, second 12 hours in a day, right? And then we tally them into these. Otherwise, it's really hard to kind of graphically plot them on a graph, and then we count them. So you can see that generally across these 12-hour intervals over 12 days, is that teens post more teens post photos, and then also more of them remove photos. And I'll actually get into the what kind of photos, the more of them remove photos. And also, teens tend to post more photos and also remove more photo in the same time frame, right? So basically, what is it telling you basically is teens actively post photos and also they actively remove photos. Okay, but why do they remove photos, right? So this is the kind of like the next question that we have. So this is when we were looking at the average of likes per photos for the ones that were removed and posted, right? So this is the interesting part. The ones that were posted that weren't removed, they generally got like 250 likes. The ones that were posted that were, they ended up getting removed. Subsequently, they only got like 120 likes. So then this is the thing about like, okay, so, well, it seems to us that it's pretty clear that teens they post, like you were saying, to actually get attention. And a lot of them, like I mentioned, they post, they go, follow me, I'm a cool person, follow me, so I can boost my followership count and then get people interested in like talking to them and stuff like that. So this is a pretty clear evidence. And in fact, for adults, adults do it too, but do it to a certain extent, right? So basically, the difference is not as big. It's like 110 and 70 photos, so 70 likes. So adults do it to a certain extent, but not as much as teens.
Are you saying that teens remove photos that get less likes?
Yes.
But couldn't they get less likes because they got removed? I mean, so don't you have to normalize for the amount of time that they are?
Yes, we did. This is through the same, the 12-hour interval. So this is the average across the 12-hour intervals.
Oh, okay.
Yes, basically during that time frame that were posted and removed. So then basically it is adjusted for, I guess, within the 12-hour interval slice.
But during that 12 hours, is it possible that one photo is there for only 12 hours and the other one is only there for 10 minutes because then the team says, oh, I don't really want to show this?
Yeah, so normally the pattern that we see is that in fact, they're so quick about it. It's almost like they can quickly tell, like if you post something on their Instagram photo, and then in fact, the ones that get a lot of likes, they will get it within, obviously the spike, right? It happens within the first like 12 hours or first 24 hours. And they know right away within a day or two. I mean, within the first day, they don't usually wait. These don't last until the second day. So what it means that the ones that don't get likes, they don't last until the second day. So, yeah.
But my question is about causality.
Yeah.
If I understand correctly, you're inferring that because they don't get enough likes, that's why they get removed. However, you cannot say that that's true, right?
So you're saying that if they left the photos up.
Photo gets likes at the same rate. Everybody gets 50 likes an hour.
Yeah.
Okay, and I remove it for some completely other reason. Maybe because I don't like myself.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Just as many likes
So
as other pictures. Then after I remove it, it's not going to get any additional likes, and you would observe that pattern.
So in fact, then this imagine like there might be another, because I mean I don't have the graph in this talk obviously. So imagine like this, right? So like imagine if this is a number of likes on average, per photo. I mean, in fact, we show this sort of the spike sort of over time that a photo is liked and then when they got removed, and that would be a much clearer picture. But I do think that when we were looking at the pattern though, that was the case. It's just that we didn't draw it here. But of course we can show, like for example, like I mentioned, the ones that are really popular, like the ones that get 200, 400 likes, like it's like fast. It's like it's almost like the speed that it goes is really fast. And then these ones that got removed, they didn't last because they didn't get as many likes by the time that they decided to remove it. But they also, the rate slows down. So essentially, we wouldn't say, hypothetically, you would say, well, if they were liked at the same rate. But the thing is that generally these were not liked at the same rate. So I guess this is a good point. I'll go back and draw probably the rate diagram,
so
and
you
then.
cannot say it from this plot, but you can
Not
say it from another
exactly.
Were the ones that were they removed in the first like 20 minutes, or do people usually wait like 12 hours before they would remove their?
They wait for a few hours to see.
A few hours, but not necessarily.
Not necessarily up to. There are ones that they wait longer and less, but generally like it's almost like the way that they gauge the popularity is so fast. Like you can tell whether something is liked immediately, and then I think that some teams, at least I mean it's not in the paper, it's also not in this talk. I think that they they pick the time of the day to post. I think they're pretty sensitive about that. So like they experiment. They actually do a whole lot of experimentations. But that absolutely, I mean, of course, the kind of the claim or the what I'm trying to demonstrate, but I'll bet unsuccessfully, I guess, but it's that teams actively manage their content to basically to manage their hourly perception from others, and then they want to appear popular.
Can you study the rate of posting and removing for different categories? Because you said that the most popular posts of the teens are about their feeling. Maybe it's about their feeling, and when they change, maybe their mood change and they remove the post. That's why.
So you're saying there could be some kind of a categorical difference in terms of content of the photo.
Maybe the posts that are about their feeling because they mood changed and they remove the photo.
Yeah, that's also possible too. So we can take a look at that, but we did not do that analysis. But that's also very possible.
Yeah, there was a chart like 2 slides or 3 slides back that showed removals and publishing.
Yeah, but that's overall. That's not by what he meant was. I think I'm assuming you're talking about by per category.
Yeah.
Right. So we didn't actually.
Your histogram has 2 posted and removed bars.
Oh yeah, actually, but actually no. But we didn't do the. What I mean is that we didn't do this. We didn't do the temporal analysis on that. Yeah, but in terms of the. So basically just purely average across, we have that, but we didn't do the temporal analysis by category. But because that's what we were looking at, right? Like we wanted to see the rates of the spike of the likes, and also imagine if the ones that get higher rate will get removed. But I think just because we were pretty familiar with the data, I'm pretty sure that's true, but we had to draw the graph, right? But I think, so, and also like in terms of, this temporal diagram, we can also draw for categories. But I don't, I'm sure, it's just like generally I think I think because like 40% of their photos are all like selfies and stuff, so whether they remove the, see that's the thing about, it's kind of hard to infer sometimes, because sometimes if they just want the attention, like you don't know whether they're really sad, right? So and whether they got the attention and then they remove, but then the ones that got a lot of like would stay, so. But anyway, so then what we can see, like I mentioned, is that they actively manage the content. Absolutely, there's no doubt about that, right? There's no doubt that they actively manage their perception. So then here, like this is kind of like the takeaway from the first half of the presentation. I should probably speed up. But like say they post and remove photos about mood and emotion and follow and like. Adults post much more diverse topics across the board: social, people, location, mood, and arts and design and hobbies and stuff like that. And then teens manipulate their photo content to receive as many likes as possible. Adults do that, but to a lesser degree. And so now, I'm getting into specifically about the behavioral patterns. This is actually not yet the behavioral pattern. It's really about like how they use the Instagram. What do they use it for? And then so how many likes and comments do they have over time? How fast do they reply to other people's comments, which also did an analysis. And who do they engage with using comments, and what do they write in their comments? So stuff like this, for example, we show that across this sort of 12-hour intervals, that you can see this is general trending up. This is like a sort of a slight slope, which is hard to see, but I think it's trending up over time, so they get more liked over time. So it's kind of like you're saying that the teens' photos, if you just like let them stay, they get more likes over time, whereas adults generally remain flat. That means that could potentially indicate that adults' photos don't get as much exposure, or that people are paying less attention to them depending on whatever they were posting. So teens, like I mentioned, like we can talk about, I'll go later into their fellowship diagrams, in that they get more, they connect to more strangers, like people who they don't necessarily know. Like somehow like their content have higher reach, has a wider reach of audience. So generally adults, like they mentioned steady in terms of the number of comments on their photos, but whereas teens get more over time, right? So then also here is teens on average reply to the comments posted about their photos on average within 8 minutes, or actually I think it's like 7 point something. Like they reply pretty fast, right? And whereas adults it takes like half an hour to reply. So of course you can think about whether. So this is why, like, I guess for teens, there's almost like a social etiquette. Imagine among the teens, they're talking to each other. They know that I know you saw it. and you didn't reply to me. What does that mean? Blah 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 blah. Right? So whereas adults just take longer. Generally, okay, if you send somebody a message, you don't expect to hear until the next day, right? So it's like, but for teens, they do. I think that the expectation is there that they expect people to reply a lot faster, and also in terms of, see, this is where we look at who added comments on their photo. So these three diagrams are basically the people who posted their photos use the tag to specifically mention a username in their photo. So they specifically refer to others, right? So basically for adults, you see how like 80% is all that. And then the smaller pie, the orange slice is about other people mentioning the people who posted the photos. And then there's the others mentioning others. You see how the huge difference is, meaning that when teens post on the kind of like a public photo in a open forum, somehow people, it's almost like you post something and then people will post, hey, by the way, did you see this? Or they have a discussion about the person's photos, but the person may or may not be followers of the team, right? So as in like their photo tends to somehow have wider reach and they get more discussions from like people that they don't know. Whereas like adults, like they tend to have these one-on-one conversation perhaps with the people that they know, right? So
This also, could this also be related to the demographics? I forgot what you said about the distribution of adults versus teens.
you're talking about, see, the thing is, because of the age detection that we did, that obviously the people that they had interaction with, we don't have their age information. So I kind of wonder, yeah, like what are the age? So I guess if this is a common practice, you assume that they mostly talk to other teens, but imagine if like there's this adult that talks to a lot of teens, and that'd be kind of creepy, right? So, so I don't know, but we don't have that age information because this is based on the profiles that we already have the age information detected using the facial detection and the NLP, right? So we don't actually have that information, but we could, do the analysis, like I mentioned, manually doing 27,000 profiles. Huh? Yeah, it started by using the algorithm, and then it prunes out the sort of eligible, sort of the ones that don't have profile descriptions and the ones that don't have actually a real profile. And then we randomly selected a certain amount and started to kind of manually label. Yeah.
As far as I know, Instagram only has basically like 2 privacy settings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like everybody can see my pictures, so only my followers can see my pictures.
Yeah.
Couldn't this, first of all, can you see that in the API?
No, only the public ones.
You're only considering public?
Only the public ones. Only the public ones.
So I would assume that probably more teams have public profiles than adults, and that might explain that.
That's a very reasonable assumption. Yeah, that's a very reasonable assumption. But these are only public. Yeah. So we don't get access to the private or the ones that are not shared publicly. So then here also. So here like there's another chart about like the number of unique users mentioning the person that posted the photos. So you can see how like for the adults, this is much higher. So basically when the people posting on the adult's photo, they specifically mention the adult's name by referring back to them, meaning that they're directly having a direct conversation. So this is kind of like another way of looking at the last figure, right? So essentially teens have like their, they somehow their photos get discussed more by other people. And then, so here is another analysis using Luke, which is a kind of a sentiment analysis package, and also like checks for like sentence structure and stuff like that. So we saw that the teens, of course, they use less words and less word count in their comments, and also they use slightly shorter words. And then most of their, I guess in terms of expression, they use words that express more emotionality and sociality, right? So this is also like more so than the adults. And also like here, they use almost twice as many follow words, means that they actively seek for other people's followship. Essentially, the sentence will literally say, follow me, please, or something like that. And people actually do follow them. It's like, why do you do that? It's like, okay, but you just do it. Because apparently there's an etiquette too. So actually there's another analysis that that we did not show it again in this paper, in this presentation, is in that, in fact, the more people that you there tends to be a kind of a notion of reciprocity. So if you actually like other people, if you actually follow other people, usually they will follow you back. So one of the very common strategy for teens is that they just end up following like everybody, hoping that they will follow back. And I'll say like roughly like I'll say 2/3 of them do. So it's like a really quick way of boosting your fellowship, and then they just actually do that. So it's almost like kind of like in the Tinder context, you keep on swiping right? So it's like hopefully somebody will swipe right too. So basically the same notion in Instagram. So to recap, I guess because it seems my time is almost up, but the teens post fewer photos than adults and also post less diverse photos, mostly I think to attract followers and stuff like that. And also they remove more photos than adults, and they remove photos that have fewer likes. They have more likes and comments per photo than adults, and then they reply faster. Third-party groups discuss about their photos more. They also use kind of shorter phrases. They use more words with more expression. And then, so some of the question that interests me from this study that I was asking myself is more like, so is it more as in, like we were talking about perception management versus privacy management, right? So for example, that the fact that teens remove photos with fewer likes seems to suggest that it's a perception management, whereas adults may remove photos for the latter, as in like, but this is just like, how do we know? Is this an effect? Also, this is a big question when you talk about intergenerational research, is this an age effect versus a generation effect, right? So like, for example, do people grow out of it, right? So this is a follow-up question as in, do they really do this for identity formation? Or kind of because we were talking about the social bubble issue about like sort of so for example, if it's really for identity formation, then meaning that once they gain a sort of a more established identity, they have a more structured friendship network, will this behavior change? Meaning that we have to do like a really longitudinal study to follow that, right? So meaning that, and also generation effect could be something that it's well known for example, World of Warcraft. Do any of you play World of Warcraft? Used to, right? But the people who are still playing in that space they're like, mid-40s and they have children, they have family, right? But it's almost like they grew up with it, so they continue to do that because their social circle is there. They formed a strong bond. But then meaning that, as in that, does this mean that like, do people, when the question that I have, like I mentioned, whether it's an age difference, meaning that something that you grow out of, or whether it's this generation of people that grew up with this technology will behave this way into the future. Right, so this is like a question whether meaning that people always ask about. They have these claims about, the iPad is really kind of detrimental to learning, or it has a much longer impact to the society in general. But people are making these claims, but you need like really long-term longitudinal data to actually show the difference.
So perhaps Facebook could be a better data set to answer these questions because now people were 18, so that would be in your teenage group. Now they're in your adult group. So.
Yeah, so then the next question, in fact, this relates to my next question about as in these days, we already know that teens have moved on from Facebook. They only use Facebook to get in touch with their families now because they know their parents are there. Like they don't, like it's not their dominant use of a social networking platform anymore. So the question that I have that relates to the sort of the last question here is in that like, so this is also the question that we have about the conversation spaces, but like as people shift to these different social media platforms, like people now like everybody, like all these kids use Snapchat, right? They use Cake, they use these other like platforms, but they will continue to migrate. Whether is it because of a novelty effect, or is it because of like coolness, or is it because when the other people, the mainstream catch on, the teens tend to not want to be a part of the mainstream. They want to keep on shifting to the next cooler thing, but then maybe we'll provide a newer feature. So the question about what kind of features do people need, like as in future going forward? Do we reach a sort of a threshold where like, okay, so we can all decide that, okay, these are the common features that we all need in any social media platform. It doesn't matter whether it's cool or not. We just change the color of the website or something like that. So the question about where, and then it's in that, what kind of conversation spaces do teens gravitate to? Of course, with the new Snapchat stuff, it's all about ephemeral. I mean, meaning that because it's ephemeral, so meaning that the message doesn't last and they can post whatever they want, and they're not supposed to be tracked. So they like that kind of, but also with the video, teens tend to like Vine a lot more because they prefer videos now. So meaning that, but once we get to that stage, then how, as in like what other things can people do, like what, virtual reality or something? I don't know, but yeah. So, but these are just kind of general, like kind of a open question. But I mean, I think that because of the high penetration of the social networking site these days, like I mentioned, like I think 70% of the adults have like access to internet and also like social media sites. So it is really a rich and I think platform for people to do these kind of generational studies, across generational studies or age-based studies. So this is the last slide. So I think maybe you have any questions? Well, at least the talk was interactive, so I mean, we were like kind of going back and forth throughout the talk, which I like. So thanks for being active participants. I really appreciate that. So
I think really like we are looking at liking and this reciprocation. You will go back on Facebook. The like was introduced, I think, in 2008 or something like that.
Facebook?
Yeah, the like feature.
Oh, okay.
I think
Might be like earlier.
So maybe you would still have like people who are like teenagers and now they're more young adults, and so that could actually answer whether people grow out of these habits.
Yeah.
Or it's a really generational thing.
Yeah. So I think like ever since you know how like that Jeff Hancock or somebody who posted the emotion as contagion paper.
Yeah.
That was like a hugely controversial, and ever since like Facebook stopped publishing papers, I mean they stopped like publishing a lot of papers. They published some. So what I mean is on the back end. So there's all these questions about also where to do this type of research, right? Imagine if you had the power of Facebook, and then so this is what a lot of times people when they think about publishing these kind of web science based studies, it's almost like, well, whatever, like under the face of the sun, like whatever papers that you would publish, Facebook and Instagram, they probably knew this like 2 years ago. So it's almost like, wait, do they? But actually, I think that that might not necessarily be true because I think in the corporate setting, they actually don't have dedicated personnel to ask these kind of questions because it's not important to them maybe. But if you can actually justify like the revenue or whatever, they might do it. So meaning that,
there's a lot of UX people that try to understand this thing. I think I saw a talk about, I think
Sarah Yardi.
Yes.
Yeah, of course. And she's not at Facebook. She's in Michigan, so.
Yeah, but she was looking at like when people go back in town to their old pictures from like 10 years ago, how to interact with that content and whether actually when you do this kind of surveillance and stalking, how far in the past you go in somebody's time. Because in the end, it means a lot to them to like understand if like there's possible usages that people are.
So have you ever thought about? So have you ever thought about like Facebook's intention of showing you these memories from 2 years ago, or like 5 years ago, 10 years ago?
I think that's the idea, right?
Exactly right. That's a huge experiment, right? So it's like, what do people talk about? It's like I think that's exactly the point. So they are doing the experiment, but of course there's in terms of the sort of individual memory and also collective memory, community memory. There's a lot of research in traditional psychology area that basically focus on how we as humans construct these memories, whether it's like time-based or whether it's like episodic, or whether there's also this model called the flashbulb memory, which you talk about like you have this trigger that will bring back all this kind of childhood experiences and stuff like that. So then, but I think that generally also I think there's a harder and more difficult construct to formulate, which is the community memory that people were talking about. How do this is actually traditionally this is like rooted in kind of like these war, a refugee kind of memories. Like how so you can imagine like a group of population, they all have similar memories about an event. Like how do they actually perceive an event and actually have generated a collective construct that actually kind of everybody in the community knows about. And that's actually a phenomena that I think that people, it's a little bit harder to identify using social media, but I think that it will be an interesting area to look at in terms of the way that information reach and how that have influence on like sort of like a population of people depending on the information reach. So.
This is being videotaped, so I'm going to sort of anonymize my question. I know two really great great kids.
Who are these people? Just tell me the names, and then
I'm
like
always surprised by
beep it out in the
stayed
audio.
over at their house for a weekend. It's how much like offline drama there is about online social networks, like with them and their friends. Like they, are always talking about like, well, I saw so and so post this on Facebook, and so liked this, but I decided not to like that because they didn't like this, and so it was kind of like, and also like when these people want me to see something, they like drag me to the computer and show me the thing on their Facebook feed as opposed to just sharing it. So I guess I was just wondering, like, to what extent is like the offline, like this interaction of the offline, like the interactions are happening
Kids
in the
will,
world.
kids would. I mean, I think in terms of the analysis, teens will absolutely want to have a record of that being shared and seen. They absolutely want that, as in meaning that for. I think that maybe the perception and privacy management for the older adults that you were talking about, they don't want to be seen to have done some activity so that other people can see because they're afraid to be judged. But teens, I think that at least what this study will indicate will be they actively want that evidence of sharing with others and other people talking about it being tracked in the social media as a piece of reputation device, that they want to be seen. They want to be in the space. If it's offline, they want it to be online. Then they will, in fact, people checking in, people documenting their food. They want it to be online so that it's documented there. Yeah.
I was just wondering, like, how much. Lots of research in this area has found that you can't really figure out what is going on in the real world. You can only see the records in the online world, and so maybe there's more sharing going on than what is really reflected here because the sharing is happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think for the teens also, obviously, I mean, imagining any life of a teenager is probably pretty trite, and that's why they post only like emotion selfies and stuff like that. I'm just like, how many more selfie and cat pictures can you look at? But like, I mean, really, I mean, you think about their life, it's probably pretty like, I don't know, like banal and like bland, right? So, but still, they somehow find stuff to feed into, constructing an online identity and digital identity that supposedly reflect, kind of like in grade school. If you think about, you go to the school, you'd be like, oh, yeah, that person has like a new pair of shoes, like the newest backpack, and then like cool poster. So this is like actually the modern age of, I guess, establishing reputation management in that circle. So people actually, I do think that in the school setting that they talk about who has went to what party and stuff like that. But this is all just kind of shifting. So I mean, I'm just saying the fundamental human nature or the human forces, I don't think that it necessarily changed. It's just that the representation of it is different because of the affordances of the digital media that we have today. So.
All right. Well, I think we're out of time. Thanks.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks.